Spring break came with a tragedy 30 years ago. 21-year-old University of Texas Austin student
vanished during a spring break trip with a group of friends after crossing the border to Matamoros, Mexico.
Kilroy was abducted and murdered by a satanic drug smuggling cult in Matamoros.
The UT college student was kidnapped off the street, tortured, and sacrificed by members of a cult. His remains discovered the next month on a ranch along with other victims.
On March 14, 1989, a young student named Mark James Kilroy went missing while he was on vacation in Matamoros, Mexico. He was studying at the University of Texas at Austin and was enjoying his spring break. Sadly, he was kidnapped by some very bad people. They took him to a ranch and kept him there for a while before they did something terrible to him. The leader of these people, Adolfo Constanzo, believed in strange things and told his friends that sacrificing Mark would keep them safe from the police while they did illegal things like smuggling drugs. The ranch where this happened belonged to a man named Brigito Hernandez, but he wasn't involved in the bad stuff. Mark's disappearance shocked the world, and everyone was looking for him. Finally, less than a month later, they found his body on April 11, 1989. It's a sad story that made many people very scared and sad. And this is his story.
They still talk about Mark's death every spring break. Mark had been kidnapped right behind him. My friend wasn't killed on the border. He was slaughtered.
Mark James Kilroy was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 5, 1968. His parents were James William Kilroy, who worked with chemicals, and Helen Josephine Kilroy, who helped people as a paramedic. They moved to Texas after Mark was born. Mark did well in school and sports. He played baseball, basketball, and golf with his friends. He was in Boy Scouts, did well in his classes at Santa Fe High School, and was in student government. He ranked 14th out of 210 students. In 1986, he went to the University of Texas at Austin to study to become a doctor. He wanted to take the medical college admission test.
That Tuesday, Mark Kilroy and his friends would go to Brownsville and walk across the border to Matamoros. They went bar hopping. This is where Mark would last be seen, alive.
On March 10, 1989, Kilroy's friend Bradley Moore finished his exams early. He went to Austin to pick up Mark for spring break. Then, they went to Santa Fe to meet two more friends, Bill Huddleston and Brent Martin. After that, they drove to South Padre Island, Texas. It took them 9 hours because of fog. South Padre Island is 20 miles away from the Texas-Mexico border. They arrived shortly before midnight and stayed at the Sheraton Hotel. The next morning, they went to explore the beach town. When they got to South Padre Island, there weren't many tourists. It was still early in the 5-week spring break season, but more and more students from all over the U.S. would come as the weekend went on. On March 13, 1989, Kilroy and his friends went to a bikini contest behind the Sheraton Hotel. Later that night, around 10:30 p.m., they went to Matamoros, Mexico. They parked near the border and walked into Mexico from Texas. Matamoros was crowded with 15,000 spring break tourists from the U.S. The main street, Álvaro Obregón, was full of foreign tourists enjoying cheap drinks and Mexico's relaxed drinking laws. Around 2 a.m., Bill Huddleston suggested they all head back to South Padre Island. As they stepped out of the Hard Rock Cafe, they spotted Mark Kilroy chatting with a woman from the Miss Tan Line bikini contest. The street was bustling with thousands of tourists leaving bars and making their way to Brownsville, Texas, while others scattered in different directions. The crowd made it tough for Mark and his friends to stick together as they tried to cross the border. Mark stopped at a house on Álvaro Obregón to bid farewell to the woman from the contest. He waited for Bill, who had dashed off to find a restroom nearby. In the short span of 5 minutes, Mark vanished. His friends scoured the area for hours, even after the streets had emptied and the establishments closed. Without cell phones to contact Mark, they assumed he might have crossed to Brownsville with another group and was waiting near their car. After waiting in the Brownsville parking lot for a while, they decided to return to South Padre Island, thinking Mark might have gone back to the hotel with someone else. When they woke up the next day and Mark still hadn't returned, they contacted the police to report him missing. The worry gnawed at them as they waited for any news. They replayed the events of that night over and over, trying to piece together where Mark could have gone. Every passing minute felt like an eternity, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on their minds. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of Mark. His friends couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. They distributed flyers, talked to locals, and searched every corner of South Padre Island and Brownsville, hoping for a clue that would lead them to Mark. Months went by, and the search continued with no breakthrough. The once vibrant group of friends now gathered somberly, their laughter replaced by worried whispers.
There were no witnesses. To Finley and his friends, it was like Mark vanished. 3 weeks later, the border town of Matamoros in the Rio Grande Valley would make national headline.
The search for Mark started like a regular investigation when he went missing. Sometimes, students who vanished in Matamoros would show up later, feeling sick from too much drinking and unable to remember much. Mark was just one of many who disappeared that year. But what made his case different was his uncle Ken, who worked for the U.S. Customs. When Ken heard about Mark, he got the police involved, both in the U.S. and Mexico, thinking something bad had happened. Mark's friends went to Mexico with customs agents to try to remember what happened, but they couldn't remember exactly where or when Mark disappeared. Mark's parents went to the Rio Grande Valley and put up posters everywhere, offering a big reward for any information about their son. They thought maybe the police weren't doing enough because Mark's killers might have been connected to them somehow. Then, on April 1st, 1989, Mexican authorities saw a car speeding past a drug checkpoint. The car had come from Texas and didn't stop when it reached Mexico. This was a big break in the case because it showed that whoever was driving might have something to do with Mark's disappearance. Instead of using their loud police sirens to stop the truck, the police chose to follow it quietly in a plain car. The truck driver ran through a checkpoint and drove all the way out to a ranch called Santa Elena near Matamoros. The police stayed back and watched from a distance. After waiting for about half an hour, the truck driver left the ranch and went back into the city. That's when the police decided to make their move. They found out that the truck driver was Serafin Hernandez Garcia, who was related to a local drug lord who ran things around the ranch. Instead of arresting Garcia right away, the police wanted to gather more evidence about what was happening at the ranch. The police talked to people in Matamoros to learn about what was going on at Santa Elena. They used this information to make some important arrests. Those arrested were taken to a jail while the police talked to someone else who worked at the ranch. This person saw a photo of Mark Kilroy and pointed out a small building on the property. When the police asked Garcia about what happened, he admitted that several people, including Mark Kilroy, had been killed at the Santa Elena Ranch over a few months. The police were determined to uncover the truth and gather enough evidence to bring justice to those involved. Hernandez Garcia told a story about a man named Adolfo Constanzo who led a group that did terrible things. They believed in strange rituals where they sacrificed people to protect themselves and their drug business. Constanzo thought that sacrificing people would make them strong and safe from the police and harm. One day, they decided to find a white American man to sacrifice. They went to a place where young people were having fun on their holidays. Among them was a guy named Mark Kilroy. While Mark was hanging out with his friends, one of Constanzo's men tricked him into getting close to their car. When Mark got close, 2 cult members grabbed him and forced him into the car. Mark tried to escape, but they caught him again. They tied him up and took him to a ranch. They kept him there overnight. The next day, Constanzo and his followers came to see Mark. They covered his face and mouth and took him to a cabin. They hurt him all night. Then, Constanzo killed him with a big knife. After they killed Mark, they did even more awful things. They took his brain and cooked it in a pot. They cut up the rest of his body and buried the parts. It's a horrifying story about how people can do such terrible things to others. It's a reminder to always be careful and stay away from dangerous people. Mark's tragic fate serves as a warning about the dangers that lurk in the world. Hernandez Garcia said yes to showing the police where Kilroy was buried. They found it by seeing the ends of wires sticking out of the ground.
Eventually, he led them. He says, you know, I know where the guy you're looking for, the spring breaker, Mark Kilroy, I know where he is.
Hernandez Garcia talked about what the wire would do. He said that when they found the bones, the cult members would put them on necklaces to stay safe. On April 11th, the anthropology professor, who knew about cults, went with the police, not knowing what to expect.
On April 11th, Kilroy's body was discovered on the Santa Elena Ranch. The professor of anthropology studied cults before, but wasn't prepared for what he was about to see.
On April 11th, 1989, Hernandez Garcia and 4 others were taken by the police to Santa Elena Ranch. They were forced to dig up graves there while held at gunpoint. They dug for many hours. Eventually, they uncovered between 13 and 15 bodies. These bodies were badly harmed. Among them was Mark Kilroy's body. Mark and the others had been killed over 9 months. The police confirmed Mark's identity by matching his teeth with dental records. Most of the victims were drug dealers who were rivals of Constanzo. They were not random people taken by Constanzo, unlike Mark Kilroy.
There was clearly a cast iron cauldron, and I'm looking over there before I even get out.
2 weeks later, the Mexican police came back to the ranch where they found the bodies in Santa Elena. They set fire to the small building and placed a wooden cross over the remains early in the day.
The shack and land where these grisly murders happened would be cleansed and burnt to the ground.
They said that they knew the shack meant a lot to Constanzo, and burning it publicly would make him go insane. And this plan worked perfectly because
They thought they knew how much the shack meant to Constanzo. They believed that if they burned it down where everyone could see, it would drive him crazy. And it seemed to work. The next day, Constanzo reportedly lost his temper when he heard about the arson on TV. By killing Mark Kilroy, Constanzo made sure everyone paid attention to him, even people from other countries. He made the Mexican government focus all their energy on catching him and his gang. When the bodies were found on April 11, 1989, Constanzo ran away to Mexico City. But the police didn't give up. They sent 16 officers to look for him. One day, they saw a guy at the supermarket using a lot of American money to buy groceries. They thought he was helping Constanzo, so they followed him. On May 6, 1989, they found Constanzo's apartment building. They waited for the streets to quiet down before they went in. While they were waiting, they saw a black car pull up. The police went to check it out. Constanzo saw the police from his apartment window and started shooting at them. He kept shooting until he ran out of bullets. He got impatient waiting, so he told one of his friends to kill him and another cult member. The police found them after about 45 minutes, and Constanzo's friend ran out screaming that Constanzo was dead. He confessed to being part of the group that killed Mark Kilroy, but said Constanzo ordered most of the murders. Mark Kilroy's parents said they felt relief knowing their son's killer was caught. If you want more stories like this, consider subscribing to our channel.